Did he just say he's faster than me? Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. And he's not really known as a fast guy. He gonna learn November 22nd what fast is all about.
In professional boxing, 100 experts can watch a fight and 99 can agree on the winner. But the only opinions that matter belong to 3 people who might be watching an entirely different fight. On June 9th, 2012, Manny Pacquiao landed 82 more power punches than Timothy Bradley. Yet, he walked away with a loss. This wasn't just a boxing match, it was an expose. It was the night the world saw Manny Pacquiao win, but Timothy Bradley had his hand raised, revealing a dark truth at the heart of the sport.
How would you compare his career to anyone else, any of the big names you've covered?
Look at the amount of titles that he's won and the divisions that he's won over the test of time. Look at everything that he's accomplished. I mean, I think when he arrived here, was he like 112 pounds? I'm not sure exactly, but it was, you know, he was a young guy, and look at what he's grown to become, and look at who he is and what he is. I mean, he's fought everybody who's come in front of him, so he's been one of the great champions of all time in boxing history.
We're not just going to rewatch a bad decision, we're going to dismantle how it happened and expose the system that allowed it. Imagine being so dominant at your job that you aren't just the best, you are a global icon, a sitting congressman, and the undisputed pound-for-pound king of your entire industry. This was the reality for Manny Pacquiao in 2012. He wasn't just a boxer, he was the boxer, a cultural force riding a 15-fight, 7-year winning streak that saw him dismantle legends like De La Hoya, Hatton, and Cotto. He was a whirlwind of offensive firepower, a beloved hero whose fights were global events. He wasn't just expected to win, he was expected to dominate. But here's the problem with being on top of the mountain. The only way to go is down, and sometimes you don't fall. You're pushed.
He's a lesson for everybody, because athletes sometimes reach the top and they know everything and they don't learn anymore. This young man, as Freddie will attest, keeps learning and getting better. And that's what world-class athletes should do. And right, and not to forget God, of course. And let me tell you something, I really believe that when the full story is written, this man will be considered the greatest fighter that ever lived. And I make that's a wild thing to say, not the greatest fighter of the era, the greatest fighter that ever lived.
The real-life impact is that when you're that big, you're also a target, not just for opponents, but for the complex machinery of the business itself. So who was the man willing to step in front of this Filipino typhoon? Timothy Desert Storm. Bradley was no slouch. He was an undefeated, tough-as-nails, unified junior welterweight champion known for his awkward style, iron will, and incredible conditioning. He was a legitimate world-class fighter, but world-class and Pacquiao class felt like 2 different universes. Bradley was moving up in weight and was a massive 5-1 underdog. The public consensus was that he was durable, yes, but simply didn't have the firepower or the elite experience to trouble the king. This is where the business of boxing gets murky. Bradley was tough, skilled, and also co-promoted by Bob Arum, the same promoter as Pacquiao. In any high-stakes game, you must always understand the relationships behind the curtain, because the most dangerous opponent isn't always the one standing in front of you. A surprising insight about this matchup is that for a pay-per-view main event, the anticipation was almost zero. This was aggressively marketed as a routine defense for Pacquiao. The media, the betting lines, and the hardcore fans all saw it as a foregone conclusion. The only real question circulating wasn't if Pacquiao would win, but how? A spectacular mid-round knockout or a wide, punishing decision?
I think Pacquiao is got to be one of the hardest working fighters in boxing today. Like that, you know, it just as you said, the most skillful person may be.
This narrative was a business decision. It was meant to showcase the king before he moved on to a real fight, like a 4th showdown with Juan Manuel Marquez or the fantasy bout with Mayweather. This public perception had a dangerous side effect. It set an expectation of total annihilation. He wasn't being judged against Bradley, he was being judged against his own legend. Let's step into the ring for the opening rounds. From the moment the bell rang, the difference in speed and power was startling. Pacquiao was a blur, darting in with explosive 3- and 4-punch combinations that landed with a thud, then vanishing before Bradely could even set his feet to counter. This was the Pacquiao everyone paid to see. In the 3rd and 4th rounds, he wasn't just hitting Bradely, he was staggering him. It was clear, undeniable dominance. The fight wasn't close. It wasn't even competitive. This early work is supposed to bank rounds, building a lead on the scorecards that's theoretically impossible to overcome. When you establish clear dominance early, you force your opponent to play catch-up, a desperate game that almost always leads to more mistakes. What happens when your body betrays you in the biggest moment of your life? Early in the fight, Timothy Bradely suffered a severe injury. He tore ligaments in one foot and, by his own account, fractured the other. This completely shattered his game plan. Bradley's style relied on athleticism and movement to create awkward angles. Suddenly, he had no foundation to stand on. He became a stationary target, unable to pivot, generate power, or escape the pocket.
Were the punches what you expected?
They were like bullets.
This should have been the final nail in the coffin, making Pacquiao's job exponentially easier. But the real-life impact of this injury was bizarre. It forced Bradely into a pure survival mode, absorbing incredible punishment, which some judges can perversely misinterpret as toughness or guts. It's a strange thing to watch a man dominate a fight, yet simultaneously lose his killer instinct. These middle rounds are where the robbery was truly built. Pacquiao was clearly in control, landing thudding left hands almost at will and snapping Bradley's head back. But after staggering Bradely multiple times, Pacquiao would stop. He took his foot off the gas, content to coast, pot shot, and win a wide, easy decision. This was the mercy his promoter, Bob Arum, would later rage about. This lack of sustained aggression created lulls in the action, and in boxing, lulls are dangerous. It gives a judge a window to look for anything the other fighter is doing, like a desperate, non-landing jab, and reward them for aggression.
So prepared, and you fought such a good fight, and yet there was Manny Pacquiao having you on the deck twice. What happened?
I don't even remember, man. I really don't, man.
Have you ever had that feeling where you know you're right and someone else confirms it? For millions watching at home, that confirmation came from HBO's legendary unofficial official scorekeeper, Harold Lederman. Lederman wasn't just a fan, he was an actual, experienced professional judge. His job was to score the fight live, clean, and without bias. As the rounds went on, his card became almost comically one-sided. By the end of the fight, he had the fight scored 119 to 109 for Manny Pacquiao, a total blowout. It wasn't a close fight. It wasn't a tricky fight. It was a clear-cut, easy-to-score schooling.
I have never been more shocked and in this case saddened by the outcome of a sports event than I was by that one.
Let's look at the cold, hard numbers. The raw statistical proof of the fight tracked by CompuBox. This isn't about opinion or ring generalship. Pacquiao landed 253 total punches to Bradley's 159. But the real story is the power punches. Pacquiao landed 190 shots of substance compared to Bradley's 108.
I'm talking about the Miracle on Ice, Kirk Gibson, Dwight Clark's catch. Those were all positive outcomes, shockingly positive. In this case, so shockingly negative because Stephen A., I tweeted round by round. I had it 11 to 1 Pacquiao. I had it 119 to 109 Pacquiao. I knew that Pacquiao had landed almost 100 more punches than Timothy Bradely had. I gave him high marks, Timothy Bradely, for taking those punches and hanging in there and coming back for more.
In fact, Pacquiao landed more power punches in 10 separate rounds than Bradely did. Bradely, the challenger, only landed more punches than the champion in one round, the 10th. The real-world impact of these stats is undeniable. They paint a picture of a one-sided beating. Bradley's offense was completely ineffective.
And now we hear that both of his feet or legs were hurt. That's just all the more reason to wonder how in the world did those judges score the fight the way they scored it.
It's a surprising insight, but the final bell often acts as a truth serum. Before any scores are read, you can see the results written on the fighter's body language. Manny Pacquiao was relaxed, smiling, and looked like he'd just completed a solid 12-round sparring session. He went to his corner, raised his arms in a routine victory pose, and looked completely untroubled, as if his win was the most obvious fact in the world. Timothy Bradely, by contrast, looked like a survivor. He looked relieved the punishment was over and proud to have simply heard the final bell, especially on 2 injured feet. There was no explosive celebration from his corner, no hoisting him onto their shoulders. It was the body language of a man who knew he'd been soundly beaten.
Man, I think I broke my ankle or my foot. You know, I felt a pop at the top of my foot, and he just said, what do you want to do? You in the fight of your life? You want to quit? I said, no, we're going to have to go through it. You know, that's why probably towards the middle of the rounds, I was a little flat-footed. I stood in front of Manny, and that's when Manny came on. You know, but then I just sucked it up. And
we've seen the fight, we've looked at the stats, and we've heard from the experts. The result seems undeniable. But this is the exact moment the robbery moves from the ring to the scorecards. We're about to expose how this decision was manufactured and the people behind it. If you believe this kind of deep dive analysis is important for the sport, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. It lets me know you want more content that pulls back the curtain. Now let's hear those scores. This is the exact moment. Let's paint the scene. The MGM Grand Garden Arena is buzzing, but not with suspense. It's buzzing with the relaxed energy of a crowd that has seen the obvious happen. Michael Buffer, the voice of the sport, steps to the microphone. Judge Jerry Roth scores the bout 113-115 for Pacquiao, a polite expected cheer. Judge C.J. Ross scores it 115-113 for Bradely. A sudden confused "what?" ripples through the crowd. And then Buffer delivers the final line. Judge Dwayne Ford scores it 115-113 for the winner by split decision. And new that erupted is one of the most unique in sports history. It's not a cheer. It is a deafening, unified, guttural roar of pure, unadulterated shock. The boos were so loud they nearly drowned out the broadcast. Pacquiao smiled in disbelief. Bradely, to his credit, looked as shocked as anyone. It was the sound of 14,000 people's brains short-circuiting at the same time. The lesson is that in boxing, you must never celebrate until the final word is read. The impossible is always on the table. Who were the 3 people who saw a different fight from the rest of the planet?
Robert Byrd.
The lone voice of reason was veteran judge Jerry Roth, who scored it 115-113 for Pacquiao, a card that was still criticized for being far too close. The architects of the robbery were Dwayne Ford and C.J. Ross. Both were established Nevada judges. This wasn't some rookie mistake. These were seasoned officials entrusted with a multi-million-dollar main event. They both inexplicably turned in identical 115-113 scorecards for Timothy Bradely, meaning they each had to find 7 rounds to give to a man who was outlanded in 10 of the 12. This is the real-life impact of their decision. It proved, in real time, that the checks and balances of the sport were completely broken. The takeaway is that a system is only as strong as the integrity of the individuals within it. When that integrity fails, the entire system collapses in public.
I just scored on my head. I just looked at the fight, and I could tell who was winning. Pacquiao did win the fight, but like I said, it wasn't his night tonight. You know, I'm pretty sure if he fight again, I'm pretty sure that he returned and regained his title.
So how exactly do you find 7 rounds for Bradely? You have to engage in what's called imaginative scoring. Both Ford and Ross, looking at the same fight, somehow agreed that Bradely won 5 of the last 6 rounds. Think about that. The challenger, with 2 broken feet, was supposedly outboxing the pound-for-pound king. The scorecards are a masterclass in contradiction. Look at round 7. Pacquiao outlanded Bradely 27-11, landing 22 power shots. All 3 judges gave it to Bradely. Round 5 was even worse. Pacquiao 22 punches to 8. Ford and Ross gave it to Bradely. This wasn't a case of rewarding aggression, it was a case of ignoring reality. You want to know how bad the decision was? Listen to the broadcast team, the people paid to be impartial storytellers. As the decision was read, HBO's Jim Lampley, the voice of boxing for a generation, couldn't contain his disgust. His immediate live call was, "That is a terrible, bogus decision." Tim Bradely has scored and upset split decision victory over Manny Pacquiao. God only knows how. His colleague, Harold Lederman, was even more blunt. That decision was a crime. These aren't just opinions. This is a catastrophic failure of the sports infrastructure, broadcast live to millions. When the play-by-play men are openly calling your event a crime, you don't just have a controversy, you have a credibility crisis. The takeaway: truth's greatest ally is an uncompromised, immediate reaction.
What is happening to scoring in Las Vegas, Nevada? This is the second decision here this year that those of us who follow the sport have to look at and think of as absurd. Bob Arum smiling as he hugged Timothy Bradely.
Yeah, both under contract, but you know.
Let's picture the scene after the chaos. Timothy Bradely, the newly crowned champion, is being rolled to the post-fight press conference in a wheelchair due to the injuries he sustained losing the fight he officially won. The optics were beyond absurd, and yet, when asked, he mumbled, "I think I won the fight. I have to go home and see the tape to see who won." Even the winner wasn't sure he'd won. Bradley's defense was hollow. He knew, and the world knew, what had really happened.
Well, you know what, the funny part is there's 3 judges out there. And that's the way they judge it. So, I mean, what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? That's the way they judged it. My corner felt we was winning the fight. You know, I was controlling the action, but like I said, you know, there was 3 judges out there. 2 of them felt that I won the fight, and that's all I can say on that. You know what I mean? But we definitely got to do it again. I definitely got to go back to the drawing board. I know where my mistakes were in the fight, and I just had to go back and correct them. I should have an easier night. I definitely would like to do this again. You know, I heard the boos at the end of the night. You know, which is okay, but we need to definitely do this again in November, and you know, let's make it more decisive.
So how could this happen? What unseen force could possibly lead to such a baffling outcome? The answer, as it so often is in boxing, was sitting right at ringside. Promoter Bob Arum. Arum, the head of Top Rank, promoted both fighters. This wasn't a hostile takeover. It was an inside job. A Pacquiao win was a dead end. The big money Mayweather fight was stalled, but a loss? A controversial, unbelievable, infuriating loss? That guarantees a sequel? It creates a new storyline, a new villain, and, most importantly, 2 more pay-per-view events. The rematch, and then the trilogy. Arum himself famously said, "I'll make a lot of money in the rematch." He wasn't hiding it. The takeaway is to always follow the money. In a closed system, when an outcome makes no logical sense, just find the person who benefits from the chaos. What happens to a judge who gets it so catastrophically wrong? In any legitimate sport, they'd be suspended, demoted, or fired. In boxing, they get another 9-figure mega fight. CJ Ross, one of the 2 architects of the 115 to 113 Bradley card, was shockingly defended by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Her reward was the next super fight, Mayweather versus Canelo. In that bout, she turned in one of the most infamous scorecards in history, scoring a fight Floyd Mayweather won easily as a 114 to 114 draw. The public and media outcry was so overwhelming that time she was finally shamed into retiring. This is the rotten core of the problem. The Pacquiao robbery wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of a system that actively protects and rewards its own, whether they are incompetent or, worse, compliant. Following the global firestorm, the WBO, the sanctioning body whose belt was now on the line, panicked. To save face, they assembled a championship committee of 5 different, independent, international judges to rescore the fight from a tape. The result was a total farce. All 5 judges scored the fight for Manny Pacquiao.
We're going to have 2 very different opinions. I scored the fight 117, 111 for Manny Pacquiao. I thought he clearly won the fight. You know, I think in the first half of the fight he was much more effective in terms of his aggression. Bradley looked to me to be clearly hurt, even though he was in a lot of the rounds. Bradley, he was fighting very hard, but I thought Pacquiao was clearly winning the rounds. The second half of the fight, I think, is where there's a real divergence of opinion. There are those who felt that Bradley was doing an effective job of boxing from the outside and frustrating Manny. I thought he was doing a great job of keeping his distance, but not a lot else very effective.
Unanimously, the WBO then held a press conference to officially announce that, yes, their champion had been robbed and Pacquiao had clearly won. But here was the punchline. They admitted they had absolutely no power to overturn the decision. They could only recommend a rematch. Why do we still talk about this one night all these years later? Because it wasn't just a bad decision. It was the moment the sport's deepest flaws all converged at the same time. You had a cash cow champion, Pacquiao, who his own promoter, Arum, had a direct financial incentive to see lose in a fight scored by judges, Ross and Ford, who were totally unaccountable to anyone, in a state, Nevada, whose athletic commission defended them. It was the perfect storm of corruption. The CompuBox stats and the live HBO broadcast made the robbery so obvious, so undeniable, that it shattered the casual fan's trust forever. This is the fight your uncle brings up when he says boxing is crooked. The lasting damage wasn't just a single loss on Pacquiao's record, it was a permanent stain on the sport's soul. The ultimate takeaway is that legitimacy is fragile. You can spend a century building a sport, but you can destroy its credibility in 3 minutes of baffling scorecards. In the end, Manny Pacquiao got his revenge. He easily outpointed Timothy Bradley in their rematch 2 years later, and then did it again just to be sure. Bradley, for his part, went on to have a great Hall of Fame-worthy career, proving his toughness to the world. But the damage from that one night in 2012 was done. Timothy Bradley, who should have been celebrating an undefeated record, was vilified and received death threats for a decision he didn't make. The night they stole it from Pacquiao wasn't just about a single fight. It was a brutal, public exposure of the entire system, proving to millions that what they see with their own eyes simply doesn't matter. And that's it from us today. Until next time, thank you for watching.